each of us has multiple identities, multiple things that feed our identity. Part of that could be your race or ethnicity, your age, your gender identity or expression. Do we know what the difference between gender identity and expression is?
Yeah.
So what is a gender expression?
Gender expression is how you present yourself. And how I think, sorry.
So that's gender identity. It's the way that you live. The gender expression is the way that you were born.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So we may be born with certain genitalia, but then we may have an identity that's not the same or is a mixture. So just to give you an idea of what that is. Also, you may have your national origin may be part of it. These are the things that you can not really change much about. These things you have a little bit more choice. So think right now, you have a little tiny hello, my name is, and you get up to 5 words, which is actually more than most people get when they get labeled. What aspects of these would you put on your label? So take a couple minutes and label yourself with no more than 5 words that connects to something about these.
So you don't write those words.
Yeah, I wouldn't write these words. Writing education probably wouldn't describe you, Paul. But your educational experience may describe you. When you're done, pop it on your chest. How they describe themselves. I'm going to do this. Yes. Are you going to tell them that? Or? Just so it's clear. Yeah.
I could actually write Charles Windymaker.
I've never met anyone like that.
You decide. What are you presenting to everyone else? What is your label? Whenever, if you wanted someone to read your label, what would they read? No, because I can't label you. I'm not going to. I know. But you cannot see it. Okay, so I could use bow tie to label myself, right? Or
What? I am. I did that once and someone got really uncomfortable.
So you only have a couple seconds. You gotta shoot. What are those things that you identify as?
No, Jesse.
What? You don't know. Who are you? Oh no, existential crisis.
Those are we using those things? Are they using these or are they just coming up with their own?
So you can use these to decide elements of yourself. So here's an example.
So you don't say age.
I may describe myself as a 30-something. That is a part of who I am. I'm not going to write age, though.
You want us to guess? I'm kidding.
You guess our age?
Guess his age.
Oh, it is.
So get some words down. Give you a couple more seconds to get something written on there and stick it on you. What's your label?
Can I use multiple words for one descriptor?
I'm not answering.
Put a hyphen in it.
Marching band.
Never mind.
You just put nerd in
That's
Ah, it's kind of like picking your traits on a sentence. It's actually a pretty good example. That is?
Yeah, sure.
Is dad on vacation?
White man. That's what you would write, 21 white male. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell that white man.
So we're going to move on just because.
My name is
There's Miles Davis. So we're going to move out from the labeling of human beings to the labeling of calm down. So let's all take a breath because we're kind of really weirdly worked out right
Are
now.
we supposed to put in articles? Caused us to think about who we are. Like, our shirts. I could have phrased that.
So let's stop for a second. I'd love to see all of your eyes just so I know you actually are attending to what's going on. So if you haven't finished, please do that. But I'm going to ask you to think about labels for music because we're going to step aside from the labels that humans apply to themselves. So think about music because we're in music class. So I had these up on my wall when I was in elementary school. These genres. And in these genres, it told me exactly how to identify music perfectly. Every piece of music could fit in one of those boxes. What about pop?
What about folk
Oh,
rock?
where would that work? Crap.
Well,
Well, hold on, so let's find some other things. So you're telling me these labels don't function? Okay, I'm gonna ask you all to kind of stay on topic, or else we're not gonna have an enjoyable time. So Bridget is suggesting that these don't work for everyone. Okay, well, let's see if they work for these. Well, I don't know if it's on, so that's the truth.
It's hard sometimes to say what my pieces are exactly about, but it started with the idea
This
of
is Sonny Keating. Does that fit well in one of our boxes? What would you label this as? Solo cello. But she's not playing this. She's got a computer playing.
But it's hers.
I think she's doing
She doesn't know figure solo. Does that make it solo? Look at that one. Like the afternoon. Does this fit? How would you label this?
Instrumental.
Instrumental.
Oh, yeah.
So what is this? Jazzy hip hop, so we kind of put a blend there. And later in the song, we have it as a rapper. I don't think that this fits in one of those boxes.
You're right, I didn't see it.
I am not a brony, but one of the people.
That
I work
fits.
with. It does fit. Yeah, oh, you can put brony as a box.
Alright.
All of my. So the problem is that genres, the labels we put on genres, work for certain things. They don't work for everything. So why do we label songs and pieces of music? Because iTunes, so because there's a mechanism to sell them, and so I might want to know what I like. What else?
Also, if you like hear something from a genre that you like, or that hear more of the same thing.
So we suspect that the label describes a kind of music that if we heard one, we've heard all of them. Okay, what else? Cool.
Just to make it easier to find things and categorize things.
So labels help us categorize and find things. Those are things that are important in life. Yeah.
There are certain cultures that are associated with certain genres of music. Like the drama of metal music.
Okay.
I don't know, I can't remember those, but yeah, that's the cool.
So those labels come into play and they're useful in certain respects, but they don't really tell the whole story. This is actually a map of what most music, where it exists when it comes to genres. It's all blended together. They all kind of sit on multiple intersections of different kinds of genres and different kinds of music. So let's go back to talking about people and how you decide who you work. So look at each other's name tags. I did like the two and choose. afforded a really nice opportunity.
Yeah, I get it.
You were afforded the chance to label yourself. So look at, there are things of fruit and veggies on the table. Just take a look at them. They do have labels. Do the things inside get a chance to decide the labels? Probably not. Sweet corn probably doesn't.
Are we gonna open the can?
I don't know if you want to.
Something different in there?
But, so let's talk about this though. The way that I look at you, if I only knew you from your label, what would I be missing out?
Not much.
Not much, really. Really.
My serving size.
Your serving size. What makes you comfortable? Serving? Okay. So let's take a look at how labels work in education though, because this is where things get funky sometimes. So if I'm presented with an IEP or I'm presented with this as a child with a disability, I'm presented with a whole bunch of labels. I may be presented with labels that are physical characteristics. Some of you may not have put all your physical characteristics on here. Right? Like I may not say tubby, but I'm tubby. That's not something I may want to do, but you may be able to have some specific ideas about my life, which may or may not be true, based on my physical appearance. So if I'm sitting here as the teacher, and this is a student, I'm first of all going to say, well, how do those physical characteristics shape how I'm going to interact with them? How does a diagnosis like Down syndrome shape how I'm going to interact with them? Hey, Nathan, can I ask you? I'll leave that alone. Cool, thanks. And then how does being in a special class change how I understand who you are? And the reason I want to draw your attention to is that a lot of you didn't quite understand what the medical model was. The medical model has nothing to do with giving people medical services at all. The medical model is something that we call a way that we look at the relationship between a disabled person and ourselves that is a relationship of power where I, the expert, have to fix the person with a disability. That is what the medical model suggests. So as a teacher, I'm looking at how do I fix or fit this student into a specific space? How do I work with their diagnosis? What does it mean to consider them as special? And so you get a lot of books that talk about how do you work with special needs kids? How do you work with disabled children? That would be as if I had a book that said how to work with a 20-year-old white male super cool. Now it's funny you laugh about that, but when I said books about working with special needs kids, you didn't laugh. In fact, a lot of your discussions were a worry about, I'm not pointing it out as a problem, but you worried about how do I function in a classroom while also working with special needs kids. But would you ever say, how do I function in a classroom and work with a 21-year-old white male super cool? It seems kind of weird, doesn't it? But why does that seem weird? Like, why are those things not interchangeable?
We have accepted like 21-year-old white male cool, whatever. Like the norm. And so like something that deviates from that would be like, oh, like now I have to like do something different.
So anyone that's not 21-year-old white male super cool
Yeah.
is not the norm and doesn't fit. That's why, okay, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I think going along with that, it's like you say there aren't books about how to teach 21-year-old white males, but like every other book that isn't about teaching disabled kids is about teaching normal, like, kids who people that
Will we say normal?
Yeah.
So this is a safe space for you to say things. Understand that none of us are going to jump on you because of the terminology used. I get in trouble because I use disabled persons, because there's people in the field that use people with disabilities. The one thing you may not want to do is say the disabled, because that's kind of like saying the Hispanics. It's thought of as kind of not so great, just to let you know. But your terminology is not going to be, I'd rather you say something than amass yourself in terminology. But here, think right now into your groups. Who decides these labels? Who decides them? Well, talk to your group right now. Who decides the labels that I would be able to see? Well, who are those people? But like specifically, you're going to be working in a school. Who decides that? Who? So the principal looks at a kid and goes, you have Down syndrome? Probably not going to function very well.
I think a lot of times That
Very
like,
nice.
try and find,
Like,
like,
not even purposely, but I feel like naturally we like gravitate to people who have similar interests to us or have similar interests. And so they, even if a person with a disability might have similar interests to them, they're like, oh, like they don't look like me or they don't speak like me or something. So they don't act like I do.
So where do these labels come
Yeah,
from?
but the question, I think, more
Everybody.
Well, society, but when you say society, what is that?
not the person.
So not the person. I may find that label out later on, how I label myself, right? What else? So not the person, so who is it then?
everybody come in contact with.
Every single person?
Yeah.
How so?
Like, I mean, I brought it up here, like, if you're walking down the street and you see someone, you're not gonna, like, you're gonna have an immediate reaction, and that's most likely gonna be some sort of label, even if it's not directly a label, it can be attached to it.
How did that come into your head? If you're looking at me and you see there's a tubby guy sweating walking down the street next to me, you automatically have a flash about, guy probably needs to exercise more, probably not eat so many gummy bears, which is both true things. But like, what made you be able to do that?
I have a brain.
Yeah, but did your brain just come stock with that?
No, I've learned through the years, like, I don't know, adjectives.
Okay, so how did you learn adjectives?
I went to school.
So someone told you, if you see a fat guy, most likely didn't exercise.
Uh,
Literally, they told you that?
No, I don't know, I don't know, through living, I just, you know, you
Okay.
kind of do things.
Okay, Stephanie?
I think a lot of it comes through like media and social media, especially like in today's time, because like very, very, very young age children are like fed through media. They're just like, they gain more knowledge that way than they do through like experience.
So who feeds the media? Who feeds corporate America? I heard we do. Okay. Cole, what you got?
For me, it really seems like most of our labels come from, like, directly, like our parents and teachers, but indirectly just the previous generation and each one before that. So, like, our stereotypes are almost tradition. That's the point.
Stereotypes as tradition. That's actually a really beautiful way of understanding that. Do you mind if I steal that? Swoop. That's a great, no, but yeah, because stereotypes have changed or a lot, right? I mean, they're not a natural thing. They evolve, yeah.
There was a thing I heard one time where it was like a new concept that when you see someone and you think something, it might be like racist or like negative towards the person, and then you're like immediately like, wait, no, I don't think that. That the first thing you think is what society has conditioned you to think, and then like your immediate gut reaction, and then like the thing you think after that, where you're like, no, that's not right, is what you personally believe.
If you let yourself have that second.
Yeah, yeah.
Because how often in a day are we in such a big rush that we have to deal with what the
And
first
skim
instinct-
over.
It's an interesting thing. Let's all challenge each other, no matter what. Wherever you're at. As soon as you have an assumption about someone, go, hold on, why? Why am I doing this? Because that might be an interesting thing. Yeah, Bridget?
Well, sometimes I think it's good to have an assumption like that, because like, I walk my dog and sometimes at night, sometimes down a bad street, and I'm gonna be more alert if I see someone who I perceive as threatening, as opposed to like a girl who's shorter than me, you know? And so sometimes it's good to have that alertness when you're in situations like that.
So you've identified, and we've actually identified this 3 times now, the way that labels function to help us, but also at the exact same time causes harm, right? Because that same label that you use to help you stay away from danger in the daytime isn't quite the same as useful walking on campus during the day. Am I right?
Campus shootings, though.
But campus shootings may not always be the same person that I expect them to maybe get me in the alleyway. In fact, like, coming from the Midwest, campus shootings happen from the people that were not the people I would have expected. My label doesn't function that way. So I'm trying to get you to be a little uncomfortable with labels in both ways, because it's easy to say, we shouldn't have labels, but you got them. Like, we function, as Cole mentioned, on labels in a lot of respects. Like genres, right? Like, we need them to categorize things. The trick goes when who decides what labels matter. So, Katie, you mentioned about society. So this is a group of white guys. Which is fairly representative of our profession, by the way. Of white men in their 30s. Just gonna tell you. Unfortunately, it's a snapshot. Ken Elvis has a nice study about that. So people like me have decided that certain social spaces and certain practices are okay. We've decided that this room should be set up like this. We've decided that certain rooms should be set up with rings on the outside so that everyone's staring at one person. We've decided certain things. This is how the social model helps us confront how social spaces and relationships cause oppression. So if we set this classroom up where I was standing in the front, remember the very first day you wanted us to stand in the middle and you all stood around, like sat around us?
Yeah.
What power statement does that say?
They're more powerful.
That I am the most powerful human being in that room and that you are subservient to me. And we said, we feel uncomfortable with this. So you wanted to set it up a certain way. We kind of just went no. We kind of asserted our power in a different way because we thought it helped a little bit. But we decide, a lot of times, what these social practices are. They come from tradition, as Cole would remind us. But those traditions are malleable. They change over time. But sometimes we treat them as if they can't ever change. So you know what happens? We get classrooms, any classroom, I'm not saying this specific, but we get classrooms that are called band, or called choir, or called general music. We get things that we have a label. When I say band, do you know what I mean? Why? Was your experience exactly the same as Maddie's?
No.
There's no possible way it was. But for some reason, we have an assumption that we understand what the word band means. Which I bet you, if you all start talking about really what happened in your bands and your choirs and your orchestras, they in no way matched. There may have been a guy waving the baton or a woman waving the baton involved, but that may be one of the small things. But we have this thing and we decide what the label is. We decide this is band, and band means this. And band was built for people like me. Right? Because I'm going to make things that fit me. Does that make some sense? Whoever decides what the label is, whoever has the power to do that, shapes the class and shapes the tradition to fit themselves. But the problem is then because, like, who decides what band means? Like, who decides that? Really? Have you like tried to look up band in a dictionary? Is there like a NAFME band thing that tells us exactly what band is supposed to look like? But for some reason, we all have an idea what band is. And I could use choir here, but I use band just because band. Band is the most obvious thing that a lot of us have in our minds. It's just an experience that a lot of us share. So this label also decides who gets to be in it. How so?
No.
Okay, so a band can't have singers in it. We've already decided that somehow.
But you have to fit the form of the thing.
They have to fit the form of the thing. You have to fit the form of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean?
Like,
I'm walking all around you.
yeah. Like, well, I play tuba, so I'm in band. I fit that form. I can't go. I play tuba. Well, come to choir or orchestra. Well, in some cases, orchestra. But
Why is that?
because someone else knew so long ago, and then people writing music for.
So people wrote music that now.
Further fit the form of.
Okay. What else? Like, who makes those decisions? Maya, did you have something?
I was gonna say, I've never been in band because I'm
Okay.
a singer, so like.
So
you
who's
know,
in choir?
Singers. And.
What do you mean by singers?
Like people who sing. I mean, in my experience, it literally could be anyone. So people who were in band could be in choir, but they just wouldn't be playing their instruments, they'd be singing. So, I mean, it was really just open to everyone.
Was it? And so I'm going to ask you all this because we tend to have rosy outlooks on our experiences when we think about how inclusive for us. I think about my high school band and high school choir and how inclusive they were, and now I'm thinking right now about the class that met in the boiler room that were never in my band classroom. Did you have anything like that? Were there a group of people who just totally couldn't be in the band or totally couldn't be in choir? Pat?
Well, something I'm learning in the ELL teaching classes that a lot of them are, they have to like fill a 4-hour scheduling block, so besides the mainstream classroom, you can't do elective. So at the end.
Who's decided that? That's an interesting thing. So right now you're discussing how administration can cause a barrier. So who decides that?
state, national standards of what levels of proficiency they need and in what amount of time, so they have to get pushed through the system to say you are now proficient in English.
What's the most important? Ooh.
But,
Good. So that's an interesting thing. Okay, so now imagine you have every chance, and all of a sudden a child who uses a wheelchair wants to be in marching band. What do you do? When you say make it work, what do you mean?
Find a solution.
But well, give me a solution right now. I'm asking us because this is what happens. I'm just gonna tell you this as I go out and talk to people and they go, oh, I'd be so inclusive, and then like the kid with the wheelchair comes to class, and like, no, you're in pit, you're in front. But what if they don't want to be in there?
You find someone willing to like march their chair around or march with them like on the field.
Okay, so what if you go to a contest?
You can make a show based
Is
around.
that allowed?
you'd have to look at.
That is the most interesting question. Is that allowed?
Would you get a penalty? Would you
Well,
be
it
like,
should be allowed because it's just another person on the field.
Yeah.
You just can't do more than like, no.
I don't know.
Like that person has to challenge the person.
So these are things that we have to unravel, is that there are these spaces that we don't question. You just asked a brilliant question, because like I would have just assumed it probably is allowed, but it could very well be written in a way that says it can't be.
or
But-
like the judge, because I feel like with marching band, it's so subjective sometimes where, yeah, you, like, even if you didn't get a penalty, that judge could be like, but that person's not actually in the form, so visual points dock.
So what if someone is marching, but doesn't have the same motor coordination? These are things that we have to consider, and we have to decide how we play with. Yeah.
Actually, for one of the bands I taught at for the fall, there was this person who lost function in their lower body. So she played trumpet, but it also like affected her upper body as well. So she had to hold her instrument like a clarinet, but also had to crab like a drummer. So she couldn't. So it was like a weird thing, and I just thought like of that, and I didn't really benefit the conversation at all. I just wanted
But
to
that's
share that.
important that you have an experience. No, that benefits the conversation way more than you think, Zach.
Oh yeah.
The trick is that you are going to go out. You're going to go out into the field. And it's really easy to say, I want to be fully inclusive, until the rubber meets the road. And then you have to decide what ethical decisions you're going to make, because they're all ethical decisions. Any decision you make that talks about what constitutes your classroom decides who's in and who's not. And how you look at labels decides who's in and who's not. And so it's one of, we have to kind of do the, I think this, but why? And also one of these things where I have to go, okay, so this label came through historically in some kind of stereotype. How is it constructed? Is there something that I can do to actually fight? Or you can just say, screw it and just perpetuate what's going on. That literally is your choice. And some people do the second choice because it's easy. But I ask you to think about how you might be a change agent. Because I'm guessing that you want music to be that thing that is what all those kids need, what all kids need.
Well, I feel like if you can generate this idea that music is inclusive and like, it's this enjoyable, because for me it's always been this enjoyable thing when we had that moment where we went around and we talked about why music is important to everyone else, and I feel like just because someone might speak different technically doesn't mean that we don't deserve to get those, have those same feelings.
And which differences we decide are matter.
Yeah.
Because like I could just say I want a brown-eyed marching band.
Yeah.
That seems really arbitrary, doesn't it? But it's not quite as arbitrary as you might think. I might have decided that long time ago that only brown-eyed people actually matter. Which version that I wouldn't count. But,
Well, that's like the Cavaliers and all the guys.
Or Madison Square.
so you're uncovering a lot of issues of difference. Disability is an issue of difference. And I encourage you to think about how you might play with things. Because when I decide that there's only one thing that I can do, that band means this, it means that I have to figure out how to fit this kid. And really that's not an ethical place to be. Because I don't think about how I have to fit Patrick, the 21 white male super cool. For some reason he gets a pass on it. But really all I'm doing all day is trying to find a way to make all these spaces meaningful and open to everyone. And so are these banned? So I'm gonna encourage you right now. Kids can do things. So get out your phones before you leave. Well, try your best. Anyway, you're gonna text my name to this number to join, and you're gonna tell us what labels or labeling practices do you find problematic. And then after you do that, figure out if your assumptions about the cream corn were correct, and open up the cans.
Yeah. We actually get your,
Yeah, if you want to. I mean, it may spill out on you, so.
no, you can do it. I just wanna know what's inside.
Have you put in your thing?
There you go.
So no is the answer. Not working for you yet?
Is there supposed to be an R after the CE or no?
No. So the number is 37607, and then you text my name in the field. And then it should give you a whoop that says, yay, you're it. Or you're not. Or you're not. You can't. That's an interesting labeling practice, because it is a labeling practice. We'll share these on Edmodo, so you have a chance to look through and think about those. We've got some both sides of these kind of labelings. Like we've got the negative, but also the positive. So after you put your thing in, go ahead and find out what's in.
Oh, yay, I'm so happy.
Yeah, they're all yours.
Oh my God.
Very hungry now.
Oh my God.
I'll take all of them. Let's got this one.
You don't like those?
I can't do math.
I love yellow. Is that bad? I mean.
So put your labeling things, and then I'll see you on Thursday.
I like yellow.
Okay, how much does it have for?
4 2/3.
I don't care for all of you.
That's the label.
It's yellow.
No, give it back. Give it back.
Oh, do you want it?
Yeah.